Elrond the Bold Meets Jesus by Bobby Grace. Elrond the Bold was travelling boldly down the road less travelled by. He wasn't sure why it was less travelled by, but that poet back at the last village was going on so much about how less travelled by it was. Elrond decided to travel by it and find out for himself. So far, in Elrond's estimation, the road seemed about normally travelled by. He'd certainly travelled by roads far less travelled by than this one. Elrond liked travelling and liked travelling by roads. He didn't especially care for alleyways when it came right down to it, particularly wandering around in them, as sometimes happened after the pubs closed and he wasn't sure of the way home. Trails, though. Elrond the Bold was fond of trails. It probably came from his mother's side of the family, Elrond thought. He'd not reached any conclusions about paths. Yet, if anybody had asked, he'd have probably said he could take them or leave them. Elrond the Bold's head was filled with these weighty thoughts, which probably explained why he wasn't wearing his heavy helmet. No reason for a guy to give himself a crick in the neck, is the way Elrond figured. A head can only hold up so much. He was adventuring. Adventuring, Elrond found, was much more enjoyable without a crick in one's neck. Elrond wondered briefly if travelling by the road more travelled by would have gotten him to the adventure faster. Well, nothing he could do about it now. Being less travelled by probably meant fewer pubs along the way. Elrond hadn't thought of that. Well, adventuring has its tribulation. Everyone can agree on that, thought Elrond. As the day waned, Elrond chose a spot to camp for the night, boldly bagging some fine fat rabbits. He'd just kindled a fire when the crackling of leaves and the snapping of twigs announced a stranger approaching Elrond's camp. As the stranger came into the circle of campfire light, Elrond thought the stranger had made a poor choice of footwear for a less travelled by road. Sandals seemed more appropriate for a more travelled by road. Elrond favoured a solid, yet flexible boot for travelling by a less travelled by road. Elrond boldly invited the stranger into his camp, checking to make sure his axe was close to hand, just in case he had to boldly whack the stranger upside the head with it. "Jesus, you look like you've had a rough day," Elrond said. "Have we met?" the stranger said. "What?" Elrond said, a little taken aback, thinking this road might be less travelled by because it's being travelled by crackpots. The stranger looked safe enough, though, thought Elrond the Bold. He'd tried being Elrond the Cautious back when he was a child, but it turned out not to be very much fun. He didn't have a knack for it. Besides, he was bold and possessed an axe. So Elrond said boldly, "Sit, stranger. I have a fire and some fine fat rabbits." "Thank you, sir. I will go to the stream and bring us back some wine," the stranger said, picking at the twigs and brambles that had attached themselves to his hair. He's a weird one, thought Elrond as he began cutting up the rabbits and wondering if he might have taken a wrong turn and wound up on the road more travelled by mistake. He hadn't seen any signs anywhere. Just two roads that diverged in a yellow wood about 20 kilometres outside of that last town. Elrond the Bold had stood there and looked down both as far as he could, all the way down to where they bent in the undergrowth. Fuck it, Elrond had finally decided, and boldly chose the one that was more grassy and wanted wear, speculating that it was grassy and wanted wear because it was less travelled by. He wished those poet fellows spoke with a little more clarity when telling a guy which road to take to the next town. When the stranger returned, much to Elrond's surprise, with a skin of wine from the creek, Elrond said boldly, "I am Elrond the Bold. I am an adventurer," while thinking to himself, "Who is adventuring down this road that I thought was the road less travelled by? But here we are, only the first day, and there's already another person travelling by it." "Jesus," the stranger said. "I'm on my way to the desert. Thought I'd check things out there for a month or so." "Jesus, the desert! You might have taken a wrong turn," Elrond said, looking around at the thick, overgrown forest. Then, not wanting to be rude, said conversationally, "I've heard they're pretty big on parables over around that desert way." "Yeah, I've heard that too. I've been brushing up," Jesus said. "Do you want to hear one?" "No," Elrond said. "I'm good." The wine flowed and the fine fat rabbits were eaten. Finally, Elrond said, "My uncle was an itinerant preacher, Steve the Itinerant. His friends called him Lefty. He travelled around in that desert for a while. He didn't seem to care for it too much to hear him tell it. "I'll take a forest over a desert any day," he used to say. "There's never enough water to have a good wash," he would say. "Huh, he might know my dad," Jesus said. "Who's your dad?" Elrond said. "God." "Huh," Elrond said. "Yeah," Jesus said. "I was raised by my stepdad, though." "Huh," Elrond said. "How'd that go? We got any wine left?" "Yeah, we good on the wine, bro," Jesus said and filled both their glasses. It was all right. My stepdad ran a small carpentry shop. Stables, cabinets, pillories and such. Mostly mortise and tenon joinery, but he had a good bit of dovetail and butt joinery as well. We'd pick up the odd tongue and groove from time to time, but the wooden floor market wasn't what it is today. He was stubborn, my stepdad, refused to use metal fasteners. He had a grudge against the blacksmith, thought he was fooling around with my mom. "We're in the Iron Age now, Dad," I would say. "Nails are the wave of the future. You can hammer anything to a piece of wood if you've got a good nail." We could have expanded, maybe even franchised the operation, but no. He was stuck in the past. "Joinery," he would say. "It was good enough for Abraham. It's good enough for us." So I decided to strike out on my own. Pursue some other ventures. Are you feeling me? I still see nails in my future, though. Elrond definitely felt something, but it was probably the wine, he thought. Elrond enjoyed the occasional conversation, enjoyed them more when there was wine involved. As the night closed and the wine did its work on the travellers, Elrond drifted off thinking he ought to try that other road someday, though he doubted that he should ever come back.